Hi guys, how are you? How's everyone doing? Hope you're having a beautiful week. Hope you're all well. It's a bit chilly here in Sydney, so wrapping up nice and warm, but maybe it's lovely and hot where you are. I hear the UK is having heat waves. My mum said it was about 34 today, so they're all very, very hot. Anyone here from the UK loving the warm weather? So today I'm going to be talking about PMS and PMDD, and talking about knowing the difference. Now, the reason I just wanted to touch on this subject, and I have talked about it a little bit more before in previous blogs and previous videos, talking about PMDD and PMS, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I'm finding a lot of women are being extremely sensitive to different hormone fluctuations. And these different hormone fluctuations can cause this kind of cyclic mood issues, intense mood issues, anger, sometimes even rage in terms of being physical with family, being physical with children and hitting. And it's around this time in the cycle. So it's a really important topic, because it's when you talk to these women, particularly if they're suffering quite badly with PMDD, it's kind of out of their control. It's something that happens out of their control, and the emotions can be depression, they can be anger, like I said, lashing out, irritation, to paranoia, thinking your partner's cheating, these really intense symptoms that just kind of get in the brain and just stay there, and they're there for those 2 weeks. And PMDD and PMS are slightly different. You've got PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, then PMS, which is premenstrual syndrome. Both happen around the same time. So we've got that premenstrual. Menstrual is obviously when you breathe. You've got bleed. You've got day one of your cycle. And so for many women, it's those 2 weeks from ovulation leading up to the bleed. Now, so the timing is the same, and the symptoms are generally the same, except for these pronounced symptoms. So symptoms of PMS can be bloating, constipation, sore swollen breasts. You can be acne, food cravings. So maybe you want some more carbohydrates or some more sugar. Sugar's a biggie. Constipation, fluctuating with diarrhea. Then headaches is a big one. Being sensitive to light, being sensitive to sound more at this time, feeling fatigued and irritable, and then changes in your sleep patterns, either feeling extremely exhausted where you've got to nap, or just not being able to sleep at night at all. And then we go into kind of the depression, the anxiety, and the sadness. Now, this can happen with both, and many women might go through this. I've got many clients that say, oh, I get a little bit anxious leading up to my period, but you know, they have a bit of magnesium and it settles down, or maybe they do some deep breathing and it's okay. And we can put that in the PMS category. But when we get to PMDD, the symptoms are very, very pronounced. And we know from some studies that there is a correlation between suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, and attempting to commit suicide in that luteal phase, which is the 2 weeks before your period, particularly in the group of women with PMDD. So this is a really big problem for those women. They suffer badly, and often it's misdiagnosed, or we don't see that it's this cyclic nature. When women are suffering from PMDD, sometimes these women can't even go into work. They can't get out of bed to cook their children dinner. They have irritability and anger that's lasting. Like I said, it might lead to lashing out and just hitting a wall, or even hitting a child, which I have had clients do, and it's particularly in this part in their cycle. The anxiety can be so crippling that if you had to give a talk at work, you just could not do it. Or it can lead to panic attacks, or crying, uncontrollable crying, and just feeling loveless, you know, losing the love for yourself, losing the love for your family, losing the love for your kids, your partner, whoever's in your life, and just wanting to go extremely introverted and not to be around these people. And then having anxiety, but also this extreme fatigue, this very, very heavy feeling, you know, heavy legs, heavy body, a feeling that's like just no motivation, no get up and go at all. It's just not being able to do anything. You might find the house gets particularly messy at this point in time, or you know, things just start to slip, and that makes you feel even more agitated, particularly if you are a type A personality. And then binge eating, so overeating, When we've got PMS, we might crave a few things. So I know, for example, leading up to my period, I crave something a little bit sweet. So I might make myself some buckwheat pancakes, and I might put some yogurt or coconut yogurt on there with some nuts and seeds, maybe a bit of fruit, and a drizzle of maple syrup. And that just hits the spot, and that's fine for me, that works for me. But when it gets to PMDD, it's that binge eating where you keep on eating, you cannot be satisfied, and you actually feel sick. For some women, they might throw up, but it's that nausea, you know, you get to that nauseous sensation. And so we can see that the spectrum is so severe. And for these women that are really suffering, I think a lot of people become impatient with them. A lot of people cannot see that actually it's being driven by hormones. You might just go to the GP and the GP says you've got depression and put you on an SSRI. But really there's this underlying hormonal issue that is going on that we need to look at, you know, what is the trigger, what is the cause? With PMS, PMS can be pretty simple. So PMS hormones, in a good world, in a good world, can be that low progesterone to elevated estrogen. So if you get your hormones tested and you have the low progesterone to elevated estrogen, it can be a simple fix. Sometimes it's more complicated. Or if it's just estrogen excess, we do some liver work, we do some gallbladder work. You might take some liver supplements like calcium D-glucarate or I3C, maybe some activated Bs, and just, you know, work on mindfulness and do that for a couple of months, and that can work really well. When it's PMDD, it gets a little bit more complex, because the problem with PMDD is it's more your response to the hormones. So it's more when the hormones are broken down in your body is just responding to the hormones in a completely different way. So your estrogen could be okay, and you could actually have nice high progesterone, but your body is super sensitive to that progesterone. This is heightened as well. Women will notice as well in the early stage of pregnancy, they might get if women get a little bit depressed, sometimes that can actually lead to that can mean that sensitivity to progesterone. So it's not often simple. So what we see with PMDD, we see low progesterone to high estrogen. It can be a common thing. Elevated progesterone is very common. When the progesterone is so high, women are more likely to get depressed and fatigued. And then we've got when both hormones are low. When both hormones are low, it can be a problem. And then just that sensitivity to the hormone shifts, which can be caused by low serotonin and the blood sugar imbalance. This is why sugar is a complete no-no, because sugar just causes this vicious cycle where the hormones continue to stay out of balance, when you continue to be sensitive to the hormones. And then there's really no fix at all. It just goes round and round. But that's how intense the cravings are. Just on a side note, if you do get extreme intense cravings for sugar, one of the best amino acids to use is L-glutamine. L-glutamine is really wonderful to kind of stop those sugar cravings. So it's good to take during your luteal phase if you're suffering from really severe sugar cravings. That can help. Then once you do that, you can work on the hormones the next cycle. Risk factors are an interesting one. So risk factors to PMS sometimes can be a bit of weight around the tummy, a family history. So if your mum suffered from PMS, passive smoking is a biggie, and then no exercising. So we know that getting on with your exercising, having a healthy diet can at least give you some comfort in terms of supporting you. But if you did have a family history, it means you do need to dig a little bit deeper through hormone tests in terms of finding out what your hormones are actually doing. With PMDD, it's a little bit different. The risk factors are a little bit different. And this goes with PMS as well. So what we find is women that suffer quite badly have often suffered a traumatic event in their childhood. Some women sexually, so have been sexually abused or abused, mentally, emotionally abused or sexually abused. These women do go on to suffer hormonal issues in later in life, like PMDD. Endometriosis is a biggie as well. So endometriosis can often be linked back to maybe sexual abuse in the past or some traumatic event anyway. And then also pre-existing depression or pre-existing anxiety with PMDD. And if you've had postnatal depression, so postnatal depression seems to go hand in hand with PMDD. So if you've suffered postnatal depression but never had PMDD, it's still good for you to have a look at what might be causing that. So sometimes with PMDD and sometimes with depressive issues such as postnatal depression, you know, just looking at your zinc levels and your iron levels is enough. But once you've looked at those mineral levels, if they're balanced and you're still suffering, you do need to go a little bit deeper into the hormones and then your neurotransmitters like your serotonin. Other risk factors, MTHFR. MTHFR is a methylating issue, and unfortunately, ladies, those of you with 2 SNPs of MTHFR, you may suffer badly, and you do need to be looking after your liver, your gallbladder, making sure you're having your methylated Bs. Another risk of depression in the family. Another biggie is mast cell activation. This is so huge at the moment. So many of my clients are suffering with this. Mast cell activation is where your histamine is high and your body is so sensitive to the allergens. And this can be caused by not only your environment, toxins, mold, food, glutamates, foods, all those foods that you're eating, or stress or perfumes, but an imbalance between progesterone and estrogen as well. So super high estrogen can really aggravate this mast cell activation. In these women, what's interesting, in these women that have this mast cell activation, they normally do better on a low allergy diet, but taking antihistamines can help. So if you've ever taken an antihistamine or taken it through your cycle and you find that helps your symptoms, it could mean that it's an underlying cause is this allergens. And I'm going to talk about this in another live. I might do it next week, talking about the period cold, because the period cold is a biggie, period flu, period cold, where you think you've got a cold, but it's actually your hormone. So that's to do with the mast cell activation as well. Heavy drinking and drugs can also cause an issue with PMDD. And then, like I mentioned before, we've got the sexual and the physical abuse as well. So all of those issues. When we are treating, we do need to first know what's going on with the hormones. In an ideal world, when we look at hormonal balance, the ideal situation and the simplest situation is cortisol is looking okay, you've got low progesterone, you've got high estrogen, so we'd give you some Chase Tree, Vitex, and we cleanse the estrogen, and 3 months later the hormones are nice and balanced. And that happens with about 60% of my clients. But unfortunately the rest, that can be a bit more tricky, there's other things going on. And so with PMS, the simplest way to look at it and the simplest way to treat it can be with Chase Tree to boost progesterone, or progesterone cream. Can be taking calcium and magnesium and B6, because we know those are the minerals that women can be deficient in, and sometimes that is enough. But if your symptoms go deeper, if your symptoms are very much highlighted in terms of the depression, the extreme binge eating, the extreme hunger, the anger and irritability, which really can get in the way of your relationships and your everyday life. With PMDD, we need to go a little bit deeper. And the first place you need to look at is your neurotransmitters, so your serotonin. And for women that have had to take SSRIs in the past, or antidepressants, and they work well, we know, particularly with SSRIs, that means that there is a serotonin issue. And if there is a serotonin issue, that will cause more symptoms in that lead up to your period. So how do we identify those? So we can look at the symptoms. So if you want to know, if you want to kind of have a look at what might be going on, you can have a look at some of the symptoms. So in that 2 weeks, not only have you got your physical symptoms, you've got your mental and emotional symptoms, but do you suffer from things like low serotonin? So low serotonin picture can kind of look like OCD, compulsive behavior, needing to do the same thing every day, or needing to eat the same food every day. And when things are out of control, you can get depressed. Sleep cycle disturbances. Constipation is a biggie when it comes to serotonin. A lot of women with low serotonin suffer from constipation. Low libido, definitely with low serotonin. Irritability, digestive issues, and just an overall sense of joylessness and overwhelmed. So you kind of have those feelings. That is kind of what that low serotonin looks like. And so it might be there a little bit through your whole cycle, but then those symptoms will really kick in that 2 weeks before your period. So when it's really emotional, when it's really in your head, ruminating thoughts, it's really in the brain, you can't stop thinking about something, you feel a little paranoid about something, you feel like you've done something wrong, that really indicates it could be a serotonin issue. So when it's a serotonin issue, we would look more towards doing support for serotonin. You know, you might look at doing St. John's wort, or you might look at doing SAMe. Exercise, cold showers are all great for serotonin. So that's that real emotional, mental. When it's mast cell activation, I had this issue. I had the mast cell issue, and I didn't know what it was. And I had that kind of cold once a month. And it was a whole day of just runny nose. And I remember being in a consult with a client, and I just could not stop sneezing. My nose was running. And I did some work on my progesterone. I boosted my progesterone, and that was what helped me. And actually, when I've had allergies in the past, it's always been low progesterone. Sinus problem, low progesterone. Boosted it, I was fine. So when it's a mast cell, you want to look at it's more kind of, what does high histamine look like? What does mast cell activation look like? More skin issues, more itchy rashes, more nasal congestion, lower blood pressure. You'll feel lower blood pressure. Low blood pressure is that dizziness, lightheadedness. Maybe when you're sitting and you stand too quickly, you feel a bit woozy, kind of thing like that. More joint pain, maybe fluid retention as well. A biggie is tinnitus. Maybe, do you suffer tinnitus that before your cycle? You know, that's a big one. That's a big mast cell activation symptom. Nausea. You're more likely to get diarrhea rather than constipation. So I know women, you know, 4 or 5 days leading up to their period, they get severe diarrhea instead of being constipated. Insomnia, brain fog's a biggie as well with high histamine. And you might get more migraines and more headaches. If it is more mast cell activation, you need to focus on your diet and your environment first, and take things that are kind of bringing that mast cell activation down, like quercetin, like vitamin C, and take foods out of your diet like dairy, gluten, eggs, soy. You know, start there. That's a real big one if you do think it is this mast cell activation. And other times, I remember I used to get, actually before I used to get a certain time in my cycle, I used to get, when I'd eat something, I get slightly itchy lips as well. I don't get that anymore, but I remember years ago I used to get that when the hormones were a bit out of balance. So that's if it's to do with the allergy, the mast cell, the high histamine. High histamine, you might also get the red kind of flush as well, particularly if you drink red wine or something might trigger that flush. So next are signs of MTHFR. So MTHFR is a biggie with women's hormones. I have done a few lives on this, but I'm going to continue and do a few more because I think it's a biggie. So if you were born, the first sign of MTHFR is being born with a small anomaly at birth, you know, a tongue tie. It can be other things, but that's a sign, a tongue tie, or, you know, dimples in the lower back. Growing up as a kid, you might have issues with your teeth, ADD, sometimes autistic tendencies, that kind of thing. And then later on in life, for women, heavy painful periods, recurrent miscarriages, depression and anxiety, blood tests that maybe come back with low B12 or low folate or low iron. Multiple chemical sensitivities, so you'll be really sensitive, and also SIBO, so you might have small intestine bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, which is where you can't eat fruits. You might get windy, lots of flatulence with legumes and broccoli and those kind of foods. Women also with MTHFR have lots of gallbladder issues, so you might get pain in the gallbladder, maybe gallbladder issues, maybe lots of reflux. And another one with MTHFR is pain and fibromyalgia, more in the muscles rather than the joints. Joint pain is that mast cell. Muscle pain is more the MTHFR because the homocysteine is high. So those are the three big areas when looking at other things. So obviously, when we want to start looking at how we support PMS and PMDD, the first place is a low inflammatory diet. You know, a good diet that's low inflammatory, low sugar. Address just normal nutrient deficiencies, you know, B6, iron, so get your iron and ferritin checked, zinc, magnesium, calcium is a good one for PMS as well. Once you've got your diet in place and you've just got your basic nutrients, then just make sure you're exercising and you're just working on your stress levels. Test your hormones to see what's doing. And then if you feel like your symptoms are so severe, you feel like they're intense, and you just feel like you're not quite getting it with doing those things, that is when you'll go a little bit deeper. You will say to yourself, okay, what are my symptoms? Which are the really intense symptoms? Are there lots of allergies? Is it severe depression? If it is depression in those 2 weeks, then you want to be looking at your serotonin precursors, exercise, cold showers, meditation, and nutrients to support serotonin like tryptophan, SAMe, St. John's wort, L-acetylcarnitine is fantastic. So there's lots in the toolbox that you can use, but first start with diet, start with exercise, and test your hormones, and go to your GP and get your full bloods, your iron, your ferritin, your zinc, your vitamin D, your B12. You can get your homocysteine done. You can even get your histamine done as well if you think your histamine levels are elevated. So do all that first, and then go a little bit deeper if you're still suffering. So I hope that helped today. They gave a little bit of an overview into the difference. And really the difference is the severity of the symptoms, and also what is basically causing PMDD, which is more the sensitivity to the hormones rather than the hormones being out of balance. If you've got any more questions, please pop them below. I will be writing this up and sending it out. And if you're interested on this subject, I do have another video on luteal phase depression, and I'm going to be going a little bit deeper in the coming weeks into how serotonin can affect your hormones, and also mast cell activation. So if that's of interest, you can tune in a couple of weeks. I'll let you know when those are. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope you found that helpful. Please let me know, and feel free to add any comments or questions below. And I'll see you here same time next week. Bye.